ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Welcome to today's masterclass. It's brought to you by Profit Master Global Outsourcing, providing premium offshoring solutions. And this whole series for 2024 has been fantastic. It's been brought to us by Profit Master, and we couldn't have done everything we're doing for all of you guys in terms of, call it free education, about learning. Masterclasses is all about learning and what we can learn new every single day. And we couldn't have done that without the great help from our friends at Profit Master Global Outsourcing and Richard Croker. So a big shout out to Profit Master. My name is Paul Jansz. It's fantastic to have you all here today. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. If you're coming back for one of our masterclasses, and I know we always have a lot of people coming back, welcome back. Again, it's been a fantastic 2024 series, and we certainly thank you for your ongoing support. We hope you've enjoyed this series. If you've missed out on anything throughout this whole 2024 year, it's hard to believe it's our last one, please jump onto YouTube. Please type in Profit Master Global Outsourcing and up will pop up all of the content for all of our masterclasses this year. We've got a pretty exciting hour ahead with my guest today, which I'll introduce very shortly, as we chat about a pretty important topic. And I know Warwick and I have been talking about this for a little while, and we thought, well, let's bring it to life. I know we might cause a little bit of controversy today, but I'm sure Warwick and I are probably not we don't shy away from that, do we, Warwick? Now, our topic today, what's killing the partnership model? So it's a bit of we'll be leveraging off a few comments from last month's masterclass as well with Terry Paul, the Findex chairman. And just following up a few key areas there we want to highlight and probably talk about in particular. And Warwick's got a few opinions and thoughts of how that's going to work through. Now, the 2024 series, it's a bit tough to say, and we're going to go into 2025 soon. So it is our last masterclass for 2024, as I mentioned before, and I thanked Richard Croker and I thanked Profit Master again. But, again, Profit Master being a premium offshoring model is all about how you can look at things a little bit different. And that's where even this particular series of masterclasses with the guests I've had is about how, again, you can look at things just a little bit different. So if you're thinking about how you can, again, change the way that your business has been operating, maybe look at an offshore team with a global team overseas to bring in productivity efficiencies, to bring in lower employment costs, to bring in increased profit, increased cash flow, increased scale, and therefore increase value, I urge you to have a look at how you could actually do this, whether you've got one person or whether you've got five. I know a number of different businesses now. I've started with one and they're going to five. Dilly McKenzie's probably online, so Dilly might give everyone a shout out on the chat bar. So if you want to actually have a chat to anyone about that and how you can start looking at the sort of people or the type of roles you can put into an offshore position, please reach out to the team at Profit Master and Dilly McKenzie. Let me introduce you to today's guest. And I've had the pleasure of knowing Warwick Cavell now for, I don't know myself. Sometimes I think, has it been 5 years? Has it been 10 years? It's probably been closer to 15 years, to be fair. The knowledge of this particular gentleman, I'm sure you guys are all going to enjoy today. His knowledge is second to none. His stories are second to none. And what you're going to hear today, hopefully will challenge the way that you think. So Warwick Cavell, welcome to our last masterclass for 2024.
Thank you, Paul. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a privilege. Thank you.
No, thank you, mate. It's always great. I know we've been chatting about this for a little while now, so it's great to actually bring it into a live audience. And again, let's see how we rock and roll with our audience today, hey?
Yep. And as you said, I think Terry Paul's session last month was really excellent and really fired up, got us to sort of, although we'd been discussing it for a while, I think it brought it to a head, and I think that was a really timely session.
I agree. Now, before we get into today, are you okay to share a little bit about you? I know you've got a background being a CA, you run your own accounting firm. You're now doing business transformation. I know you and I also doing a lot of different workshops in that leadership space. You okay to share a little bit about yourself, mate?
Well, you've done that.
Sorry.
I was a chartered accountant. I resigned last year as an FCA. As you said, ran my own accounting practice for a while. Started with the Big Four, probably dating me now, but it was actually the Big 10 then. Quickly became the Big 8, and then not long after that became the Big Four. and then went off and headed up my own, bought a practice and ran that for about 8 or 9 years, became a 3-partner firm, got out of that, sold my practice into a mid-tier firm, was a partner there for a while, and then decided to get out of accounting and do a lot of strategy work and strategic planning, coaching, facilitation, all those sorts of things. So business coaching, executive coaching, and that's really where I am today, and doing a lot of that, particularly within the professions, accounting particularly, but also law, and doing a fair bit of not-for-profit work, which I enjoy the space as well.
Yeah, well done. You're wearing your shirt there, your profitable.
Yeah.
So I think that's what our conversation's always been about. Well, how do we teach accountants or the legal profession to have profitable conversations with clients?
Yep. Yeah, and within the firm itself as well, because you know, I remember being asked the question I always asked my business clients: if you could change one thing in your business to have the biggest impact, what would it be? And one of my clients turned it around on me many years ago and said, "Warwick, you've worked with many practices and businesses over the years. If there's one thing that all these businesses could change, what would it be that would have the biggest impact?" And I said, "For me, it's the conversations. They need to be more profitable, because nothing gets done without a conversation of one sort or another, whether it's a telephone, email, face-to-face, SMS, nothing gets done without a conversation." So yet, because they're so ubiquitous, we tend to overlook them. So that was where the name Profitable Conversations came from.
Yeah, brilliant. And look, to all of you sort of watching this today, I know I mentioned it before, our Learn to Lead workshops we've been doing, and with the firms we've been doing it with, the change in having those profitable conversations with clients have been very, very fruitful for what they've been doing and how we've been teaching that. So it's been very, very good, hasn't it?
Yep. Yeah, certainly has. Yep.
Yeah. Well, mate, let's get into this. You've mentioned, I know I mentioned Terry, and you mentioned, Terry Paul as well, and as a bit of a leverage to some of the comments that he made as well. Let's start with getting your opinion on, let's call it the corporatized model versus the partnership model.
Yeah, I guess that what I'm noticing a lot is that as practices grow and become more diverse and complex, I think the old partnership model is being put under pressure. It needs a different sort of leadership style, which, while there's no real magic, you could have that leadership style in a partnership. It tends not to be the case. The partnership model has served the profession well up until this point, but to quite a good book title, "What Got Us Here will not necessarily get us there." And I think that the partnership model, particularly as practices grow and become more complex, I think, it does require a different leadership, which is often the partnership model is not conducive to that. Often the partnership model is more short-term, more immediate profit-centered. It's not as strategic. It doesn't tend to make the long-term decisions, particularly when you've got partners that, 2 or 3 partners, one who might be close to retirement. It's pretty hard to encourage those partners to invest for the future that they're not going to be part of. So you tend to be pushed into the more shorter term type, because we're thinking for ourselves, what's good for me, rather than what's good for the business. So it's not impossible to achieve in the partnership model, but the partnership model just doesn't create the thinking that's conducive to that business thinking, rather than the practice thinking, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, so let's break that down a little bit, because I suppose when we talk about the corporatized model, and again, looking at what Findex had created with Terry shared, which was I thought it was outstanding. A lot of, let's say consolidators, consolidators, which plenty have tried, and probably I know in my younger years failed to a certain degree. And I know through failures you learn, so they're not necessarily failures, but you definitely learn. Are you saying that they're a little bit ahead of the time?
Yeah, look, to some extent, I think they were. I don't think that they're a bit ambitious, because I don't think the conditions at the time really suited that consolidation model. I don't think, things like the market pressures really didn't support. There wasn't a lot of market demand for it, and trying to turn partners into employees at that time wasn't a good philosophy, wasn't a good approach, and I don't think the tech was nearly necessarily at the level it needed to be either to make this work. So there were so it was well ahead of its time, but I could never see it working in those times because, as I said, the conditions just weren't right for it. But now I think the conditions are changing quite dramatically on a number of different fronts, and I shared with you that I had to try and map it out, to try and put it on a flow chart, to try and map out all the different elements, because it is quite complex how the market has changed in the last 10, 15 years.
Absolutely. And you sort of talk about tech, and I know, sorry to go back to what Terry mentioned, but I think Terry at Findex, I know they're a large organization, but they've got a team of 60 odd people in their tech team. So it's been a major driver, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Well, it's been a major facilitator because, I think there was discussion, and I was one that always thought that, accounting practices weren't scalable. And now I think with tech coming in, I think they are becoming more scalable, so that they are becoming more attractive to investors to invest in. Whereas, going back to consolidation times or consolidators, the tech wasn't at the level that would really facilitate scalability. But I think in the next few years, it is going to, and it is already impacting. And I think professional service firms are becoming a lot more scalable than they ever were before.
Yeah, I'd agree. And so what do you see as the current day, or you sort of gave reference to that book before? What do you see as the challenges to the corporatised model moving forward?
Well, I mean, the corporatised model has its problems too. I mean, there's no silver bullet here. It's just that we use the corporatised model. I think it's got a lot of problems, but we use the corporatised model as just an example of we need to think more strategically. I mean, there are problems once you start, getting private equity involved and stuff like that, or who are a lot more profit-driven, bottom-line driven, rather than client-focused. And I think that's one of the strengths of the partnership model, is that, probably excessively so, partners would always die for their clients. Whereas moving to a more corporatised model, I think we've got to be really careful that that same level of ethics and care for the client has to be there. And there's a real risk that might suffer when you've got those sort of equity shareholders that are just interested in that. But having said that, I think that's a challenge that needs to be overcome. As I say, it's no magic in turning to a corporatised model, but it's more about professional leadership. In the current climate, it's a lot more complex market. You've got offshore staff you've got to manage. You've got people working from home. You've got clients, small businesses are demanding more and more services. They need to be, so accounting practices are becoming more diverse. They're adding, we've now got a technology offering. We've got a financial planning offering. We've got a strategic planning offering. Now, we've got finance broking. Now, as firms start to bring these together, it's a different, the partnership model has not traditionally, you're going to have different people at the top of the firm. You're going to have not all chartered accountants or not all CPAs at the top of the firm. Some of them won't be CPA or chartered accountant qualified at all. They'll come from a completely different profession. Now, partnerships have not necessarily served those people particularly well. And I can think of a couple of clients of mine at the moment that are going through this phase. It just hasn't served those people particularly well. So they would be keen to move to a more corporatised model rather than a partnership approach, where it was all held by the accountants. And so there are some real challenges both ways, but I see that trend increasing as the businesses get complex. You're going to have, more sophisticated leadership. It can't be just, tallying up the charge rates, multiplying it by the number of hours and saying that's our budget for next year and stuff like that. I think it needs more sophisticated strategic thinking, strategic planning, and that's not something that firms, I think, have been good at in the past, in my experience.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you 100%. And I think, you mentioned, which is an interesting one, so we'll delve a little bit deeper into this. You mentioned just before we might be finding people coming from different professions.
Mm.
Let's have a chat about that, because I feel that's a bit of a challenge here at play at the moment, where stats are showing fewer people are entering the profession.
Yeah.
There's a growing demand for services. What's your thoughts here?
Yeah, well, I mean, as you allude to, I think we end up with these multidisciplinary firms that are quite different from. It's not so much of a problem for smaller practices, but as you get to larger practices, and for most of my clients, and as you know, I've sort of over the years tried to help accounting practices move into business advisory services in a different way. And where I've hit a brick wall is that most accounting practices report to me, well, we don't need any more work. We're just not, we're flat chat with what we're doing. So there's no problem getting work for most accounting practices. And so, accounting practices are on a sort of a growth spiral. They're going up or could go up quite rapidly. And so that's going to push them into different brackets, and the younger people coming through aren't necessarily that keen to buy in. They don't want to pock themselves. Not only that, the cost of living, the cost of getting a property, a home, all that sort of stuff, it just makes it buying into a practice out of reach. One partner in a regional New South Wales practice said to me, it's quite a substantial practice, said to me, he said, why would we've got a guy here, young bloke, really good. He's on 180 grand a year plus benefits, and he lives in the Hunter Valley, comes into work a couple of times, into the city a couple of times a month. He's got a great lifestyle. Why in the hell would he ever consider putting himself into hock and buying into the firm? He's just got he can be home with the family. He's got an unbelievable lifestyle that we couldn't have had, previously. And so he said, why would that individual want to buy into a practice? So then you sort of start to worry with the growth and stuff like that. It's beyond the reach of many of the smaller, the younger guys coming through, the younger girls and guys coming through. They're just not going to necessarily buy into the practices the way, or couldn't even afford to, the way we used to. And so you have to look at other options to think about, well, what's my exit strategy? How am I going to get out of this practice? How am I going to get full value for it? Those sorts of things are going to be putting a lot of pressure on.
I'd agree. And I think you sort of hit the nail on the head a little bit with regards to the work, that profitable conversations, consultative work that you've been talking about and coaching a lot of different firms with. But you're right. The fact is, most of them are online, would know, well, getting work isn't a problem. Okay. So the challenge is whether it's finding good staff. We know that because even, if you look at this series is brought to you by Profit Master. So we know offshoring has become massive now, and thank God for that, because we've become more confident, and maybe COVID has allowed us to move and have team members working everywhere, because that's what we had to do, especially in Melbourne. We were locked down for a long time. So we've that's become more trusting now, and now having those teams and having those efficiencies. But we're facing, whether it's increased wages, and you mentioned it before. So I don't believe productivity has gone up. I still see statistics that productivity is continuing to either plateau or go down. Therefore, there's less profit. Therefore, there's lower valuations.
Yeah.
How does it, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I do tend to agree that I don't think we've got necessarily more efficient in the way we're doing things. I mean, there's potential to become more efficient, but I think that part of the problem is that I think that a lot of practices just aren't strategic. They're chasing after staff, and I'm saying, you're finding it really hard to get staff. You're not reviewing, you're not doing an 80-20 on your own clients. So why are you trying to hire staff for the bottom 20% of your clients? Why wouldn't you just get rid of the bottom 20% of your clients. I mean, I know an accounting practice in two-partner firm in Sydney that have done exactly that. They've said, well, there's two of us, we can't get staff. So why are we hiring staff to service our loss-making clients, the ones we don't really want or need, and fighting hard and paying above, rate to attract and keep the staff?
Yes.
And then they're servicing these bottom end clients. So what they've decided to do was to sell off $300,000 worth of fees. They said, okay, there's two partners. We want 40 clients each. We're going to have 80 clients in the practice. So but a lot of firms just aren't strategic like that. They just keep on the treadmill doing the same old thing. Now, when you can't get staff, well, and therefore it's hard to grow, then one thing you can do is grow your profits by having a look. Who are the most profitable firms or businesses that we could be dealing with? Where's our focus? How do we improve that service? And then you also become a little bit more attractive to higher level staff who want to be part of a firm like that,
Yeah, 100%. Look, I was going to ask you to delve a little bit deeper into that because you've spoken a little bit about, being more strategic in your leadership and the way that you're thinking. And I was going to say, let's get into that a little bit because it allows people that are listening to this to say, well, what does that mean? And you're right. I think what you don't know, you don't know. And, having, again, coached like you coach a number of different firms, you're right. They'll do the same old, and I'll guarantee you they're probably doing it right now for the 2025 calendar year. But have they actually thought about it? And you just went into that 80-20, which is a brilliant strategy. So again, are you okay to share just a little bit more around what you mean by that strategic leadership? I know you mentioned the 80-20 and maybe the 20% of clients that are less profitable or not even profitable, letting them go or selling them or whatever it may be, you're right. But are you okay to go into a little bit more detail about that strategic side of leadership?
Yeah, and to me, one of it has a number of sort of elements to it, but one is that, getting a very clear focus. Why does the business exist? What's its purpose? So this is sort of an anathema to many accounting practices. Oh, we just do accounting work and we accept any clients. Well, there's sort of no real focus. It's sort of, and that partly is because of evolution, the way we've always done it. And I did that in practice as well. And then it's just the way we do it. But now I think it's getting harder to really run a practice like that. So, you've got people at the bottom end of, young people who are coming into the practice, or people who just want to process single tax returns. Well, they're not the people who are going to be valuable on bigger business clients, and vice versa. The bigger business people who want to work on bigger business clients don't really want to be doing piddly little tax returns, right? So you're sort of saying, well, horses for courses. We need to be more strategic in what's our ideal client look like? Who do we want to attract? And a lot of people get confused with this because when I say to people, who's your target market? And then they turn around and say, oh, but I'm not going to get rid of any clients. I'm not asking you to get rid of any clients. I'm asking you, who are you going to design your business around, right? Who are you going to attract? So when you do your advertising, if you do any promotion, if you do any messaging, it's got to be geared for that target market, not for every man and his dog, right? It's got to be geared for that target market. So the message is consistent. We are, we will handle clients outside of the target market if we've got capacity to handle them and they pay our price.
Yes.
We're really designing our business to focus on, let's say, for example, small businesses between size X and Y, maybe in these industries, maybe not even down to an industry level, but we really want to focus on small businesses and, help them build their wealth. And it's a total solution for them. We're not into other parts of the market. We're going to design our practice around that, having a longer term impact, a more strategic view of where the business is going. Think about it as a business and make business decisions rather than, producing cash flow, short-term profit. That's the big shift for me. We want long-term profit. We want long-term, positioning in the market.
Yeah, no, look, I agree. And I think the firms, there's been a number of firms that have gone, whether it be industry specific, like you mentioned, but at the end of the day, it's creating that focus. And I think that's a really important one. Um, I think the challenge that comes for some of the smaller firms that probably want to do that. And guys, if anyone's got any comments to any of this, please throw it into the Q&A or the chat bar, because we'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Obviously, these are ours from a different perspective, from going to a lot of different firms and coaching them and finding out where they want to be. But then there's mental struggles around, well, no, I can't let go of those clients either. Do you find that a bit, Warwick?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah, absolutely. And I get arguments like, oh yeah, but we had one client last year turn from a $500 a year to a $50,000 a year. And I'm going, yeah, but that's how many clients did you have to service at $500 a year to get one of them to get to 50,000? Well, and then I asked them about that client. Did you know you should have been able to predict from a long way back that was a possibility that client would have, we sort of had inkling of that. Well, keep that client.
Yeah.
But how many clients do you have to service at a loss to get one? I mean, I could probably pick up as many clients by putting a sandwich board on me and walking up and down the street. But it's not something I'm going to do. I want to really get my business focused. I want to be really focused on the clients that I really want to service, and I'm having this discussion with about 3 or 4 of my accounting practice clients at the moment. And one of them, one guy that I'm coaching is a partner in a small firm. And he's talking about tossing in the towel, because he said, I'm just getting run ragged with all the rubbish. He's only 40, just about to turn 40. He's a good operator. But he said, it's just rubbish. I don't want to be running a practice like this. I want to be running a practice that, is really focused and we know what we're doing, rather than trying to service everybody, and that's, in any business, that's one of the tenets of strategic thinking or strategic planning, is to do that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the challenge then comes into play because there's that level of different service. They're also not doing their, I don't know what it is nowadays, is it 37.5 hours or 38 hours or 40 hours, whatever it may be. They're doing closer to 60 or 70 hours. And, yes, I think the wages have increased now. I'm seeing even things like administrative staff, $1,000 just for admin staff. It's not to discount them at all. Are they revenue generating people? And that's sort of a question that I tend to ask a lot of different businesses about the people. How can they become revenue generating and therefore profitable generating individuals, as opposed to just, they're there just to service those people that we're not making a profit on. So therefore, we're losing money on them, are we? There's a lot of different ways. And I think that's where your thought process in terms of strategic leadership comes into it, doesn't it?
Yeah. And as I say, it's also the complexity of practices. I mean, we, you and I both know Colin Simpkin very well. And I was sharing something with you the other day on his website. Yes. So practice valuation trends, and which I thought was a really good, he's done a paper on that. And if anybody, it's a free download on the website, atlnetwork.com.au. But it's a really good insight. And I did that summary table from that chart. And he was saying, practices of less than $1 million in fees are selling for cents in the dollar, average around about $1.35 at the moment, different, slightly higher in the city than regional. And then fees, size of the practice, if it's over $1 million, but the profit margin after taking into market salaries is less than 25%, then they're selling for fees, cents in the dollar as well. Same numbers, $1.35 on average, slightly higher in the capital cities. But once you get over $1 million in fees and a profit after market salaries of greater than 25%, you're then starting to look at multiples of EBITDA. And, the average is about 5.36, higher again in the city. But, you're talking about 5 or 6 times multiple as an average. And these these amounts are quite significant, and it's really hard for the younger people to be buying in. But I just mention that because that's part of the trend that's pushing us towards different buyers rather than necessarily, we're talking to you and I, PJ, talking to a firm that the young people coming up will be able to buy some equity, but they certainly won't be able to buy a substantial amount. They just can't afford it. So how are the partners going to get full value and move on in the coming years? They need to be looking at alternate buyers, but they've still got to maintain the core values of the business and the ethics and the client focus of the business. So it's a real challenge.
In your opinion, again, we've spoken about the strategic leadership side. Do you think that's just as important to identify what does my exit look like? Stephen Covey always talks about beginning with the end in mind. And so what is the end? What does that buyer look like, as opposed to, they'll always be an internal buyer, which is to a certain degree has always been there. But I agree with you. I think it's a dying model. We might get to, has it lost its relevance? But is that just as important to identify in what you call this strategic leadership?
Yeah, absolutely. So what's your exit strategy? And I always ask that of any business, even with someone who's just starting up the business. So what's your exit strategy? What are you building this business for? The business is not an end in its own right. It's a means to an end.
Yes.
So what is the end that you are trying to get to? And people of all walks of life tend not to think about that. They don't think about, what's my exit strategy? What am I trying to build here? What am I trying to create, and why? Why am I trying to build that? Is it to maximize sale price? Because if you're selling internally too, you tend to sell at a bigger, a bit of a discount, to people coming through. It's a fixed, we've got a formula here, and that formula is generally not as high as what it could be in the market, So to me, being clear about the exit strategy is really crucial.
Yep. And can we've been talking a little bit about strategic leadership. Can a strategic leader be a partner in a firm driving X amount of fees?
Yeah, I think they can, but I think you need a mix of, if that's the situation. I'm thinking about a mid-tier firm that I'm working with at the moment, and it's still stuck in the, I'm coaching about 10 of their people, and the problems that the young people are finding coming up are really created by the partners still thinking in the old partnership model, driving the whole practice by chargeable hours and then, chargeable hours write-offs and so forth like that. And I think that's part of the problem with the partnership model, is that's the sort of thinking that it encourages. And that to me is not particularly strategic. It's almost a fear-based way of trying to manage a firm. And because of that, they're just not investing in the business the way they should be. And so they're missing considerable opportunities for growth and to improve profitability. And I'm just, because they're just so short term with their, and you and I have had this discussion dozens of times, measuring performance based on chargeable hours is just fraught with, I can get really good chargeable hours, but really poor client service, because I just start a job, I get blocked, I start another job, get blocked, start another job, really inefficient, really poor client service, but I've got my chargeable hours up, and I'm just sort of, where's the incentive to really look after the client and get jobs out? Got a lot of jobs in process, but as we know, what's the worst time to be on the road? Is in peak hour when all the other cars are there. It's totally inefficient. And so opening jobs has to stop, but that's driven by this short-term thinking, not output thinking, it's input thinking. Chargeable hours is an input. It's also an individual-based measure.
Yes.
Individual-based measures to me tend to be fear-based measures. So I just don't think that I'm not going to help you, Paul, because it'll affect my chargeable hours, right? But it's the one firm. Come on. you know.
Yep. So you just mentioned some really good stuff there. And again, for those that haven't seen any of this, and yes, we banter on about this a bit, but you spoke about inputs as opposed to outputs. You okay to share what an output could be?
Yeah, well, I mean, I want to
focus.
Yeah, I want to get bills out. That's, you know, and so to me, getting bills out, strange as it might sound, is a more client-focused measure. I find this incredible. You know, accounting practices tell me we are really client-focused, and I say, okay, yeah, point out one KPI that you've got that's client-focused, and they struggle. Right. So, well, how could you be a client-focused firm when none of your KPIs are client-focused? Now, strange as it might seem, I was saying before, is that I think getting bills out is client-focused because you're turning the jobs around quickly. It's a surrogate measure for, you know, I get the jobs done in a much quicker period of time. Because instead of waiting for clients to get back to me, I use different methods to get the queries answered from the clients. We don't wait for partners or managers to review the file because we all know we've got to bill 150 grand this month, or we've got to bill 200 grand, or whatever the case may be. We know what we've got to bill. And I don't care what the chargeable hours of the person is. I just want to get those bills out because I know if I'm billing 200 grand a month, this practice is very profitable.
Yes.
But just racking up WIP to me is not. I want to be turning things around. I want to getting jobs out the door. You know, to me, and so part of the key evidence of that is that getting the bills out the door. Now I know that some people are on retainer, clients are on retainers, but there's ways around measuring that. But
yes.
Yeah, but to me, I'm interested in outputs. I'm not interested in inputs. I'm not interested in. You know, I might have a lean month this year chargeable. You might have a fantastic month, and it could be vice versa next month. As long as we're getting the jobs out, to me is, you know, I had a practice many years ago now, and they had 3 managers in that practice, and they're about to promote one of them. And I said, why'd you choose him to promote? Oh, because he's got such a high chargeable percentage and the others don't. And I said, okay, why has he got such a high chargeable percentage? And they said, oh, I don't know, he's just a very productive worker. And I said, well, that doesn't seem right to me. So do you mind if I go and interview him? So I went and interviewed him in his office, and there he was, and he had a whole stack of files in one of the old, this is before technology, and it had, you know, big shelves, like a bookshelf behind him. And all these client files were in there. And I just sort of said to him, what's that client file? What's that one? Oh, that's a client file, a Hong Kong company, and they don't need their information till February. That's another one that doesn't need their information. I'm going, that stuff could be out to the other managers and we could be billing that. But no, he had to protect his chargeable hours. And he was the one that was going to get promoted. You know, he was sitting on his hoarding stuff. And I'm saying, well, that's not what we want in a business, right? That's not the way I would want to run my business. You know, there's so much disincentive to true performance in that sort of thinking.
So what's the thought process for those sitting online going, yep, I understand. Yep, I get it. Yep, that may be me. How do I start to change that?
Yeah, I think that comment is the essence of it. How do I start to change it? I don't think, you know, I'm not a great believer in radical overnight change. I think that's doomed for failure. So to my way of thinking, I'd still be measuring productivity. I just wouldn't be running the practice based on it, because I want to see the productivity. If we're getting the jobs out and getting them out quickly, then I'm going to suggest that things like chargeable hours, productivity will go up, write-offs will go down as a natural course of events. But I want to see that. So I'd still be measuring that. But my main focus would be, got to get the bills out. Got to get the bills out. So what jobs are we going to complete this month? How do we know we're going to complete them? Let's ring the client, make sure we can get the information in time, blah, blah. If we can't, move that client to one side, put another one in, right? But we have to hit this turnaround time. And partners or managers can't sit on files for review. The culture of the place has to change. It has to change to become, we're all about output, not input, right? But we still measure the input. We still look at making sure those figures are going in the right direction. but we just don't drive people based on that. We're driving people based on getting bills out, and we become better and better and better at turning jobs around, getting work to flow, which is the essence of workflow.
Yes. Let's throw another one up there, almost like pull the pin out and throw it out there. Let's see what happens. The managers turn around and say, well, I can't control what goes to the partner's desk for review, and they could sit on it for 3 weeks when I could have got all those files out this week.
Yep.
How do we start making that change?
And that's, it's not solved by what I'm going to say, but that's part of the essence of a partnership model, in the sense that you can't challenge the guy that owns the business. You know, he doesn't have to. It's a bit as though, you know, we've seen this in some significant country. You know, I'm above the law. You know, you can't challenge me. You can't. You know, and I think that sort of thinking, you know, is endemic in a lot of partnership models. That, you know, I own this practice. You can't challenge me. You can't tell me what to do. Yep. And I've got a number of firms that are struggling with this because the partners are blocking the process, because the culture, we've all got to agree, this is what we're here to do. We've got to get this stuff out. We've got to turn jobs around, and we've got to do it efficiently. So is everybody on board, or yes, are only a few of us on the bus? Because if only a few of us on the bus, then yeah, we're driving the wrong bus. You know, it's just a waste of time. Yep. And so partners need to lead this charge. And that's where I think they need to be accountable as much as anybody else to the values of the firm, and to, you know, they're not above those values. They've got to fall in line and make sure that they are accountable for reviewing jobs, you know, whether that's setting a day, a week, or a day, you know, so that their staff know that the jobs come in, Thursdays are my days for review, or whatever it is. You know, there will be processes you can put in place, but partners have got to want to do it, right? They've got to make business decisions, not personal decisions.
Yes. Yes. And I suppose that then it comes back to the fundamental word of leadership.
You
know, are you leading by example, or are you actually, and this is the challenge that I've had, I suppose, in the years with the partnership model, is that it is flawed, because that's exactly right. It's they don't lead by example. So what you're saying about do as they say?
Yeah. Yeah, do as I say, not as I do. You know, that's, you know, and we're visual creatures. We tend to follow the example of others. You know, if I'm starting at work, and, you know, I'm a young person just about to start a new job, and someone says to me, oh, we start early here. And I think, okay, start early. And I notice that everybody comes in at 9:30. Well, when do you reckon I'm going to start? You know, and I come in at 9:30 and I get roasted. I told you we start early, but no, it's a bit like trying to drive, you know, trying to drive in a 60-kilometre zone when everybody else is doing 80. It is really difficult, you know, and then you get booked and you say, well, it's not my fault. Everybody else, you know, no, sorry, you know, you're driving at 80 in a 60 zone. Yeah, the culture is to drive at 80, you're going to get pinged, you know, and that's what we've got to understand, is that it's, you know, if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander.
Yes, yes. So let's talk a little bit about internal succession and maybe what a future exit strategy can look like. But let's start with internal succession. In your opinion, what is working and what's not working?
Well, I guess that, you know, what I'm sort of seeing is that internal succession, I think, is fine for smaller practices. I think the partnership model and all that sort of stuff is still working, you know, reasonably well. But once you get into multiples of EBITDA and valuation, then I think we're in a whole new ball game, and it's becoming really difficult for younger people to buy in. And two, there's just not the incentive. You know, if we've discussed before, there's fewer people. I was actually having a chat to one of the firms, one of the people I was coaching this morning, and she was saying, you know, ever since COVID, there's been this forecast that accounting would be devastated by AI. So she's noticed that far few people going into uni courses, accounting, and she believes a lot of it's due to that not solely due to that, of course, but it's becoming and I think PwC had an article out years ago now. I remember seeing it, and they rated the number one job to be lost as AI hits was accounting, right? They had a list of 100 jobs, and the top of the list was accounting, and sort of that hasn't happened. I mean, but it scared the living daylights out of a lot of people. And so why would I go into accounting as a career if everybody's talking about that? So that's been one of the factors, so that you don't have the big pool of people coming into the profession. You got a smaller pool to choose from. The quality is not as high. Therefore you're paying higher fees, higher salaries to attract and keep people, and they tend to have little loyalty. They tend to swap around between firms who's ever going to pay the highest price. Therefore, it becomes harder. How do you bring those people on to be partners and to buy in? And then, as I said to you before, they're very comfortable. A lot of them are very comfortable with the wages they're getting. And when you marry the lifestyle up with the wages, why would I do anything different? Why would I put my head in the noose to mortgage myself up to buy substantial equity? Right? That's not everybody. I mean, obviously there's still people buying in. I'm just saying as a general trend compared to, say, 30 years ago, it's a significant difference. And there's, we didn't have the diversified firms and to the same extent that we do now. Even relatively small firms have got the capability to bring in other diversified. So it's a lot harder for younger people to buy in, and there's not a big incentive for them to do so.
I'll just zip to a question here, or I suppose it's a question, Stuart's asked a question. So in the US, small business operators have more employee ownership arrangements. He said, we all can't be a Findex, but is it a solution operating more wider owned firms with, say, a 2.5 to 5% ownership at, let's say, 100 to 250K investment?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I do think that we haven't seen, I haven't seen substantial uptick in that yet. But I think that's one of the options that absolutely, that you will have employees, share option schemes and stuff like that, and buying in. I think that will inevitably happen, like it is to some extent in the US, as he's pointed out. But I think that is certainly one of the options. Sure.
What are you seeing as an option moving forward for future exit strategies? That's just one that Stuart just said, and that's happening in the US. What are you seeing?
Well, I think that, I think that private equity is a big part, whether it's consolidated private equity or larger firms. I think there is a real appeal there. But for those firms, they really want to see, profitable practices. They are not buying a lot of rubbish.
Yes.
And so that requires that the smaller firms need to start lifting their game in terms of leadership, as we've discussed before, and the way they run the firm, run it more like a business. But I think private equity is one. I think shareholders, employee shareholders, another. I think there's a few options, but they sort of revolve around those. Bigger firms acquiring. So, there are a number of different options, and I think that to some extent, some private equity firms that I've experienced don't necessarily want to buy 100% of the business. They want to incentivize people. So I think that's, if they're buying 50%, 51 or 60 or 40, to incentivize the others to take the pressure off. So the rest of the firm or the partners coming up can buy half the practice. I've got a dental client that's doing exactly that. They really, they're not doing it, they're pulled out of it, but they've been made this offer, similar sort of thing, of a consolidator wanting to do, but they still wanting to keep the local management there and incentivize that local management to perform, rather than just this one consolidated mishmash, you know, of bringing whole lots of different cultures together. They want to keep the local people running the local firm, but what they're doing is providing the equity for growth, the equity to exit, and some funds for growth.
Yeah, well done, well said. And look, I agree. I think there's a few things in there, but I suppose, yeah, you're right. It comes back down to what you've gone through, which is creating that focus and making sure if you're operating in a firm at the moment, what does it look like, and where do you want to be, and how are you going to start making those changes to actually get there? Because you're right, otherwise it does come down to, has the partnership model lost its relevance? I haven't met too many firms that don't want to grow, even if they're starting small. They do want to grow. They want to double in fees. Whether it's every 3 years, we used to run this model of every 3 years you should be doubling in your fees. But at the same time, you can also get very strategic on the type of fees you want to get. So I think there's a definite thought process of how that can be executed now, because tech is coming into play, and we spoke about this right at the start. So it's an important piece that needs to have that conversation so it stays relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I'd be encouraging is that people do an 80-20 on every aspect of the business, not only clients, but staff, systems, processes, just going through, and our activities in the business to sort of run an 80-20. What do we really need here? What business are we trying to create? And what's really focused, it's the old time management matrix, the urgent and the important, urgent important, and we are stuck in the urgent all the time. The quadrant 1 and 3 activities, where it's urgent and important, urgent and not important. We've got to start moving, and that's, to me, strategic leadership. You've got to move from quadrants 1 and 3 to quadrants 1 and 2. And so to me, that's what thinking strategically and strategic leadership is partly all about,
To everyone online, I'm going to delve a little bit deep into what Warwick said a little bit more on the 80-20, so we can leave you with a little bit of what to do next. And thank you, George, for your comments then. Yes, the recording will be available, so it'll be out on YouTube probably the next 48 hours, so everyone can relook at this and work back through that. So definitely appreciate all the comments that have come through. Q&A. So if you've got any questions, please throw them in there. I'd love to, if you've got any questions that you'd like to ask of Warwick. Warwick, I was going to ask you for final comments as we look to wrap up in the next 7 minutes or so. Now, you mentioned starting looking at the complete business with that 80-20 mindset. Can you delve a little bit deeper? Even, let's say, we spoke about clients before and you spoke about team before. Can you delve a little bit deeper into that and give everyone a bit of an idea of what they can start thinking about? We're sitting here November 26. It's the perfect time to look at how I always used to break it down with the business that you've got 2 opportunities for planning, and that is a calendar year and a financial year. So we're about to go into a new calendar year now. So great thought process of how we can start looking at this more strategically with your leadership. Are you okay to delve a little bit deeper into that?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's a good time just to reflect. It's not necessarily saying, let's get rid of the 80% that aren't, working. It's just saying, let's do an 80-20 so we understand our business. So if I'm, we can do an 80-20 on our clients. So which are the 20% of our clients that really are the future of the business? And I'm not saying get rid of the rest. I'm just saying be aware of those 20%. How could we service them better? How could we get more of them? And sort of build the practice around that. Secondly, do an 80-20 on the staff, not saying to shed staff. I'm just saying be aware and make your decisions around that thinking. Do an 80-20% on systems and processes. Which systems and processes? We're trying to improve the efficiency of these systems over here. But if those systems are supporting bottom end clients that we don't really want, why are we trying to improve those systems? Just, you know what I mean? So let's have a look and do an 80-20 and really go through. Let's do an 80-20 on how I spend my day. What activities am I doing? And which of those are really geared towards the business I want to be running? and then look at making notes of those things that I don't want to be doing. And then slowly, as you said before, bit by bit, it's, if anybody's read the book Atomic Habits, it's getting small steps, in small consistent steps. It's not about radically turning the business upside down. I find that is unsustainable, but let's start making small consistent steps, and just tweaking a few things. As I say, if you improve the business by 1% today, and you only do that on a daily basis, where will you be in 100 days? Well, that's a pretty big shift, in 100 days. So by the end of the year, you've improved your business 350%. Not a bit bad, sort of.
Not a bad outcome.
Yeah, just 1%, just small. When I'm working with firms strategically, as you know, PJ, I sort of say, I want you to start small. Implementation is a habit. It's either a habit you adopt or one you don't. If you start too ambitiously, you will fail. Once you fail, you'll develop a habit of failing. And so I want you to, even if the first milestones or goals are really easy, I'd prefer you to do that, hit them, and then you can be more ambitious as you get the systems and processes in place to be more quadrant 2 type firms, where you've got doing the not urgent and important stuff. But don't start small. Always, to me, implementation is a habit, and so you've just got to form that habit, even if they're soft targets to start with. Just get the habit in place, because once, as I say, if you develop a habit of missing deadlines, you miss it once, you miss it twice, you miss it 3 times. Now the damage is done. We're just going to continually miss it. Why? No, it's just not the culture of the place. We've got a culture where we can bring in and give excuses. I was just too busy. I was flat out. Okay, all right. Why do we even bother?
That's right. That's right. And then the one thing I'll add to that for everyone listening. Let me just check if there's any more questions. No more new ones. The only thing I'll add to that, when you're looking at systems and processes as well, get the team engaged. So as opposed to, there's a difference between telling and there's asking. So as in terms of a leadership quality as well, start asking questions. You might have the answer. That doesn't matter. But most people like to be asked their opinion on, how could we get greater efficiency with this, or how could, take some feedback back to them, whatever it may be, because, again, people fear a lot about their roles and their significance within those roles as well. And with tech coming in, there's a lot of fear in all of that. But I tell you what, when you start asking questions, it is a totally different ball game, because what are you doing? You're collaborating. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're working on it together, whether you're one team member or you got a team of 10 or a team of 50, you'll get the same sort of buy-in from people, and let them have their say and their thoughts and their opinions and challenge it. That would be my experience in that as well, especially when it comes to systems and processes.
Yeah, and what you make me think of there too, PJ, is that we've been talking about the 7 wastes that Toyota talks about in their manufacturing systems, and we talk about 7 wastes in an accounting firm as well. But there is an 8th waste, and the 8th waste is the one that sustains the other 7. And the 8th waste is not engaging people enough in improving the processes. So when people come to work, I want them to do 2 things. I want them to do the work, but I also want them to contribute to improving the way the work is done.
Yep. I
don't want them to blindly follow bad systems. And, this leads to a tagline or a saying that I have all the time: relentless on process, lenient on people. I mean, we get that around. We push people all the time. If we know that 85%, at least 85% of if you want to improve business performance, at least 85% of it's contributed to by the processes and systems, which the people who are doing the work often have no control over. It's the partners and the managers and people at the higher end have control over those systems, but they're trying to work with inadequate systems. But we keep pushing the people, and we don't do enough about, that's sort of lazy leadership to me. To me, the quadrant 2 activities, again, is fixing the system so people can work more effectively. but we never fix the system. We always just push people harder. So I have this saying, you know, I'm soft on people, hard on process. I'm relentless on process. We really got to get tough on process. And that's formal systems, informal systems, just even thought processes. To me, it's, you know, every outcome you get in life is created by a process. If you want to change your outcomes, change the process. It's not about hassling people. It's about fixing the process, you know.
I agree. And that's just a wonderful way to end. You know, we've just clicked over to the hour, 61 minutes. And I think, you know, if you want to take something away, and I know there was a lot for all of you guys to take away today, but that one, you know, talking about the process and the people, it's always at the back of my mind. And I always think of Warwick when I'm thinking about that as well, but use that to your advantage and see if you can start adopting something a little bit different. You may be doing it now. So ask yourself, how can I do it better? If you're not doing it now, ask yourself how you can start taking small steps to achieve what you want to achieve. Warwick, thank you. Thank you. You know, we always have great conversations and we spend a bit of time together anyway, but we always have great conversations, and it's these sorts of outcomes, I suppose, that we can bring it to the forefront, go live, have an in-depth chat, and, you know, we could easily chat for another hour if we tried to. Believe me, everyone online, I reckon we could. But it's certainly, I'd love to have you on here. Thanks for joining us for our last masterclass for 2024. It's been a pleasure having you here, mate.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks for the opportunity. It's a privilege. Thank you.
My pleasure. To all you guys that joined us, thank you again. Thanks for your ongoing support throughout 2024. Thanks to Profit Master Global Outsourcing for their continued support. We're back for 2025. We'll kick off. It's hard to believe that Christmas is around the corner, isn't it? It's less than a month now. Today's the 26th. So, you know.
My wife's birthday.
There you go. There you go. So signing off till I see you guys. Well, someone might see you soon. Someone might see you in 2025, but we'll definitely be back in 2025. So thank you for your ongoing support and stay safe and have a wonderful Christmas. Thanks, Warwick.
Thank you, Jack. See you.